Is problem drinking the same thing as alcoholism? And really, I'm making this episode today because I received an email from one of our viewers that said, he's beside him. And this, by the way, isn't a new email. I get this question a lot, so I figured if it's on his mind, it must be on a lot of your minds. So I wanted to take some time today and address this question. And basically, the email said, he's spending a lot of his time trying to convince his significant other that she even has a drinking problem because, in her eyes, she doesn't have a drinking problem because she doesn't drink every day. She doesn't wake up and crave alcohol and have the shakes and need to drink. She can go weeks in between, sometimes years or months or days in between episodes and, does that mean that she's an alcoholic? And because every time I bring that up with her, she fights me on it and says, I don't have a problem, right? So, what do you do in a situation like that? Are you right? Is that alcoholism? And if you are right, how do you break in there and make a way to inspire and ignite somebody to want to take responsibility for their bad behavior? So, I'm going to walk you through this question today. And ironically, I happen to have a lot of personal experience with this question, if you know what I mean. And what I mean is that was exactly the position that I was in for many years before I decided to be sober and alcohol free about 16 years ago. So up until that point, when I was in my 20s and I was drinking, I think probably you can relate to this, and lots of people, like, that's just kinda what we did, it was the '90s, the early 2000s, and we would put on our 7-inch heels in the middle of a snowstorm and our hot pants and our corsets and, like, go downtown and get so drunk that we lose our shoes and end up coming home and, like, we'll have 1 shoe and, like, we didn't wear eyelashes back then, but if we did, the eyelashes would be gone too, and the hair extensions would have come out if we had those at the time too. And it would get so bad sometimes that we would wake up and go, "What the hell happened last night?" Some of my best friends that I would go out and drink with, and like we relied on the collective memory of the group to be like, "Okay, well, this is what happened last night," and piece the night together and just pray to God that it wasn't so traumatic or disastrous. And 9 times out of 10, you'd have somebody beside you that was joining you in the behavior that would be like, "Ah, it was funny," because you'd feel like an asshole, and you'd be like, "Oh my god, what did I do last night?" And then your bestie who doesn't want you to feel like a jerk is like, "Nah, it was fine, nobody even noticed. Yeah, you fell down. Yeah, you barfed in your purse, but you know what? Nobody was really looking. Oh, you mean when you were on the floor doing the worm and you were dancing and, like, your butt was showing? No, 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 nobody even" you know, just kinda making you feel better about it. And I think that we do that for each other when we're younger because it's even, like, poetic to hold your girlfriend's hair back as she vomits for the end of the night, and we think this is, like, normal behavior, right? But there's a certain point in our lives where it starts to become a little less excusable, and it starts to become a little more, um, a little uglier, a little more disgusting, a little less cute. I mean, for me, I think I was around 35 years old when I was engaging in that same behavior when I decided to quit drinking because I was like, "I'm 35, man. This isn't cute anymore." Like, what I used to think would be cute or forgivable or whatever is just disgusting and tragic at this point. So how do you know if what you're doing is cute and it's fine and you're not really an alcoholic, or if what you're doing is really impacting not only you, but a lot of people around you as well? So let's go ahead and dive into how you know if it's a problem or not, okay? And this is gonna be super simple, and some of us are not gonna like to hear this barometer because I remember back when people would confront me, and I had a couple of boyfriends that'd be like, You have a drinking problem." And one in particular that, he just would tell me all the time, "You need to quit drinking and you drink too much." And I would be, like, so mad when he would say that to me. I would get so irate because I grew up with an alcoholic, and I knew what an alcoholic was. An alcoholic was my dad. That wasn't me. I was a partier, a drinker, a celebrator, and I'd always argue back with him whenever he would say, "You have a drinking problem." I'd be like, actually, This is the only thing that I get to do for myself, which is drink, because the rest of my life I'm spent busting my ass and building companies and turning the and helping people. And like, if I want to drink and not be perfect in this one area of my life, and this is all the story I would tell myself, right? I deserve to drink. I'm perfect in every other area. I work so hard. So I deserve to be drunk once in a while, or I deserve, I think it was more like, when I think about it, binge drinking for me was a way to give myself permission to stop caring and striving and achieving so much. And I was a perfectionist and I wanted everything to look perfect all the time. And when I drank, it was like, oh, thank God, nothing has to be anything. And I would go off the freaking rails and get wild and crazy because it was the only time I gave myself permission to unplug, to not care, to not worry about what everybody thought. And until I learned how to do that and speak my own truth in my everyday life and set the boundaries in my everyday life, until I learned how to do that, drinking was my permission slip to give the middle finger, right? That's how I looked at it. And so I was holding on to that. And when people would question me on it, I would get really indignant about it because I'm like, hey, I don't drink every day. I go weeks in between the times. You don't get to tell me if you think this is a problem or not. So I understand both sides, right? What that person who's drinking is feeling. And then you, as a partner or person, a loved one of somebody who's over drinking, is thinking, man, if they don't see this now, we're going to be in big trouble. Right? This is like, it's so much worse than they think it is. What is wrong with them that they're not tracking this? And the first time that, I thought to myself, well, maybe this is an issue. Okay. Maybe there's something wrong is getting a DUI, wrecking my car. But even then, and I was like really young and I was living in Chicago and I was running a multi-million dollar business as a business consultant. And I had this high achieving job, that great place. Like they moved me out there to consult for this company as a business consultant. And I was like in charge of the whole damn thing. And I went out one night with some of my employees and ended up getting so drunk that I didn't even know where the hell I was. And I was hanging out with a bunch of people, and then I just decided to drive, and I flipped my car, and I had to be pulled out of my car. They had to get me out. They had to, like, suck me out, and I didn't remember any of this because I think I must have been like, when I tell you this, it's gonna sound so bananas in pajamas that it's, like, gonna make your head spin. I believe that my alcohol level was like a point 4 something, like, shouldn't have been alive, shouldn't have been walking, shouldn't have been talking, shouldn't have been doing anything at all, and, certainly not driving a car, and by the grace of God, I didn't hurt anybody else, but I did hurt myself, didn't feel it, went into the hospital, caused a ruckus in there, and the only thing I remember about this whole experience was, "How am I gonna get out of this? How am I gonna get back to work? How can I do this so nobody knows what happened?" And it was like I went into full tilt boogie about the great cover up and how I was gonna make this thing disappear and nobody was gonna know. And I went home, I felt sorry for myself. I felt definitely like, this must be it for me. Like, oh my God, I can't believe that this business person, I'm so embarrassed. I have so much shame. I got a DUI. Maybe now I can look at it like it's a problem. And but the very next day, I went to cover up mode and I had to get a new car because I flipped and wrecked my old one. And so I went and I bought another car, the same exact make and model, like looked exactly the same. So nobody'd know anything. I went back to work, like, basically like bruised and bandaged up and like made up some story about what happened and went on about my life. And I quit drinking for about a year during that time because, I wanted to be a good girl and I wanted to do the right thing. But I still wasn't in touch with the fact that, like, well, maybe this was really an issue for me. It was still like, well, maybe I just had too much liquor that night. Or, back in the day, I used to drink alcohol and take diet pills with it. I mean, to like it was horrible. Don't ever do that. It was absolutely horrible. Like there's used to be these pills called Stacker 2, which was like these fat burner pills. And if you took them when you were drinking, you would lose your mind and go off the rails. And that's exactly what happened to me, where I could get to a point 4 and not know that I was actually like, it's a miracle. So, why am I telling you this is because even after that, during the time of that year after that DUI happened, I was so busy doing cleanup and, like, making it look like everything was okay and trying to hide it and trying to look like I didn't have a problem that I really didn't address it at all. I just kind of moved on and pretended like it never happened, right? And then the people in my life kind of were like, "Oh, well, it's okay, that's over." And then some months started to happen, and even the people that were worried about my drinking at the time and were happy that I had quit, I'd go home for holidays, during that whole year that I was sober, and people would offer me drinks. People in my own family who knew that it was an issue that would come to me and say, "Oh my gosh, you have a problem," would be like, "Do you want some wine? You can probably have wine now, right? You can probably." So, I want you to know that not only is it confusing for the person that's binge drinking, whether or not it's an issue, but it's also very confusing for the people around them as well to know, well, are you really an alcoholic or not? And what does that mean? So, let's continue along with how you can kind of measure this out. Like, I'm going to give you the simplest way to look at, is your drinking an issue for you? Is your partner really an alcoholic? Are they just a binge drinker? Do they just over it? Are they just medicating? Um, Substance use disorder is a spectrum, okay, from mild to severe and everything in between. And a periodic or episodic alcoholic or a binge drinking alcoholic is on a scale, a spectrum of substance use disorder. Now, you might be thinking, well, it's okay, it's less severe. I'm not that bad. And a lot of people get into that game. They're like, well, at least I'm not like so and so. I haven't lost any jobs. I haven't lost any relationships. I haven't lost any whatever, yet, right? Because the thing about alcoholism is your tolerance keeps increasing and the reasons to drink keep increasing. Especially the world we live in today, if we don't address these underlying issues, we're going to be a whole nation of alcoholics. I mean, you can see how the epidemic is growing and growing, especially after the pandemic and what has happened. So I want you to sit with some of these questions. Okay, is this a problem? Uh, well, let's find out. Let's ask some questions. Okay, you know that it's a problem when the consequences are outweighing the payoff or the benefit that you get from alcohol, from drinking. Okay. So let's just talk about it. Emotionally, the payoff for me, let's start with emotionally. The payoff for me emotionally when I would drink was I was an uncomfortable person in my own skin. I came from a lot of trauma. I came from a lot of abuse. I did not feel confident or comfortable in my own skin. And emotionally, it gave me a way to shut off the tape that kept telling me in every social situation, oh my God, you're stupid, you're lame, you're a loser, nobody wants to hear this. Like, why are you even here? What are they thinking of you? And I would hit a psychological shredder. So emotionally, it would help me loosen up where I didn't care so much anymore. Now, on the flip side of that, the cost of that was emotionally, it opened me up so that I didn't care anymore. So while I would be not caring what so and so thought of me, I also wasn't caring what the people I loved thought of me. And I was behaving in ways that was not the kindest, not the most loving, not the most stable in my relationships. And so emotionally, also, I'd wake up and when you have to check your phone, and you have to see what you've done the night before, and you have to look around and see like, "Oh god, are there any pictures? Is there proof? What's on the social media? Who posted on Facebook? Am I tagged?" All these questions. Emotionally, that creates a kinda like toxic shame soup in your spirit where every time you have an episode like that, you wake up and wonder what you did and what happened. That's terribly emotionally taxing on you. And I have to say that I don't think the shame of waking up and not knowing, or by the way, being reminded by another person about what you did and feeling embarrassed about that is worth the price of feeling like you can be free because the reality is you and I have to learn how to detach from what other people think without the substance. Okay, we need to learn how to sign our own permission slip to be free, to be as outrageous as we are, as wonderful as we are, as whatever as we are, without the alcohol. Okay, because those parts of you are still crying to be attuned to and to be dealt with. Psychologically, it certainly bleeds into that. I can't tell you how much brain power I wasted trying to rationalize, negotiate, minimize, and distract myself from my own pain that my drinking caused me. Psychologically, about 80% of my time was spent ruminating and catastrophizing about the things that I did when I was under the influence, or wondering how to go find my ATM card that I left at the bar with inside my pack of cigarettes with my ID that I have no idea where it is, okay? The psychological brain power that it takes to recover from an episode is no fun for anybody, okay? Psychologically, the toll we take on other people for them having to take the brain power to think about what's going on with us. Mentally, same thing, the brain power that it takes. Spiritually, certainly takes a toll, because I think that I don't know about you, but it can have this shame effect on it, where you spend after you're waking up from a binge, or you're coming around from that, you're feeling like just so lost, and like, who are you? And like, so disconnected, like a bad girl, right? Or a bad boy. And then you pray for forgiveness. I'm a terrible person. Why do I keep doing this? And you're on a loop. And if you're stuck in that loop of like, there's nothing wrong with me, I just drink occasionally, piss off and leave me alone, to, oh God, what happened? What did I say last night? What did I do? Oh, phew, nothing really happened. Thank God. Go back in again. Oh, okay. Well, I can be okay. I drank again. What happened? Oh God, I actually did do something stupid. Now I've got to spend all this brain power and all this energy making that right and fixing my mistakes. You know what else you could be doing with your time if you weren't thinking about how to cover up and recover from episodic drinking? It'd be amazing. Physically, it's definitely taking a toll, right? I mean, physically, right? It doesn't I don't know about you, but the only way that I could recover the next day from one of those episodes of binge drinking was with french fries with mayonnaise and some kind of huge sandwich from some kind of disgust, like, back in my day, it was like the Frisco burger. You'd get it like 2 AM after the bars closed. You get pizza, Frisco burgers, wash it down with some grease. I mean, I was smoking 1,000 cigarettes, when I'm drinking. I mean, there was nothing good about that, but none of that still mattered to me. Isn't that crazy? I was still stuck through comparison, comparing myself to real alcoholics, comparing myself to other people that had problem, that I failed to see the one area where this whole thing was affecting me the absolute most. And I know the one area that binge drinking is affecting your relationship the most, whether you're a partner or person, is in that one area of, you guessed it, relationship. Relationship is your barometer for how you're doing, okay? Work is not the barometer. Like, that's what everybody use. "Well, hey, I'm getting paid, honey. I'm" how many alcoholics do you know that are wealthy? Many, many. How many alcoholics do you know that are super successful entrepreneurs? Many. How many alcoholics do you know that run their own companies and fly all around the world? Many. How many alcoholics do you know that are famous and could have anything they want and have all the things that many. Work is not a barometer for how you're doing. Money is not a barometer for whether or not you have a problem or not, because there's just as many people with money that have a problem as there are people with no money that have a problem, okay? So how well you're doing, how good your company's doing, I don't your relationships is where this stuff shows up. If you have children, and I didn't have any at that time, thank God, but when I look back, I think, that was my motivator to quit, was like, I'm gonna talk about that in another video. I'll link it here about why, the different levels of, like, wanting to quit and how you through, and why motivation is like a moving target. The reason you start to get sober isn't the reason that you stay sober. The reasons change as you go over time. But for mine, my main reason was I was finally in a relationship that I felt like I didn't wanna keep fucking up, I had a man that I met that, by the grace of God, by the whatever, um, saw me and loved me in a way that I'd never been loved before, in this unconditional way, and that felt different for me, to have somebody's unconditional love. poured into me. There was no judgment about what was going on with me. There was observation about what's happening with me, but there was never any judgment. There was never punishment. There wasn't, I'm not like a bad person. It wasn't any of that. It was more like it came from love, like, wow, I see this in you. What's happening? What are you doing? Not like, why are you drinking so much and why are you doing this? But like, what's going on inside of you, honey? You know, that you feel like you need to run that far away from me and from yourself, that you need to be that drunk, that you're so checked out and removed from people in your life and situations in your life that you can't even be present for. What's up with that? And that's the kind of energy that he brought and the questions that he brought that finally it switched over like, "Oh my god. Yeah, why am I running from myself? What am I hiding? What am I burying?" And when I started to look at my drinking that way, like I was medicating something that the alcohol wasn't the problem, it was what I was trying to kill in myself or drown in myself, that I started to have a shift in my perspective, and my relationships were the motivator, and relationships is where all your stuff is gonna show up. So just ask yourself, am I an alcoholic? Am I a binge drinker? Do I have a problem? Instead of that question, we gotta ask better questions, and a better question is, what's the price I'm paying for this? What does this do for me? Who would I be without this? How could my life be if I learned how to be fully present and engaged in my life without the need to numb out, distract, run away, hide, or bring out parts of myself that I don't know how to give permission to myself to bring out unless I'm under the influence. What's the price I'm paying for this? How am I impacting other people around me? What's their feedback for me? What must it feel like to be in their shoes? What would happen if I gave this up? If you want, like Tony Robbins would always say, if you want better answers, you have to learn to ask better questions. And so I think that's it for today. Those are the questions. I've decided. I think I beat this horse enough. Okay. I love you. Take excellent care of yourself. And if this has been helpful for you, like it, leave a comment, share it, make sure you subscribe, especially if you find value here. It helps us help more people. Okay. I'll see you in another episode of Addiction and Relationships with Heidi Rain.